get started in a minute or so, but if you could state your name, your pronouns, where you're from, and we'll get
Hello, everyone. Can you put in the chat your name, your pronouns, where you're from, and something that made you smile last week if you haven't already? And we'll get started really soon.
Great. We're so glad all you guys could make it tonight. There's so many of you. That's awesome. I'm just going to introduce myself. My name is Kristen Losi, and I'm the outreach coordinator with CCJ. And this is my coworker, Lisa DePauli, also with CCJ. And we are an environmental justice organization in southwestern Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh. I know some of you guys are from New York, all over. That's really awesome. So the way tonight is going to work is we're going to have about a 30-minute panel discussion with the two directors of Invisible Hand, so Melissa Troutman and Joshua Pribanic, who are joining us tonight. And then we are going to have about 10 minutes where you guys can ask questions to them, and you can put those questions in the chat and we can ask them for you. You can also just ask them to them yourself. And then we're going to have about 10 minutes of breakout rooms for a small group discussion. And then we're going to come back and have a large group discussion and kind of wrap everything up. And now I will pass it on to Lisa.
Hey, everybody. So good to have everybody on with us tonight for our last film in our environmental fall film series, environmental justice fall film series. We selected this film because we think it's just a phenomenal film to finish out the series and get us activated to get involved. My name is Lisa DePauli. I am the communications manager at the Center for Coalfield Justice. So the intention for this environmental justice fall film series is really to just learn about the different facets of environmental justice, how important it is. And for us gathering here tonight, we want to share our experiences and learn from each other and connect with each other. And last of all, of course, learn how to get involved. And then I'll send it back over to Kristen Losi for our Zoom 101.
Yeah, I'm sure most of you are experts at Zoom by now, but some people might be new to this. So just at the right hand of the screen, there should be the chat function, and you can press everyone to either chat everyone or chat an individual person. And Mark Dugan with CCJ, he'll be our tech help tonight, so you could message him if you have any issues. And also at the bottom left hand of the screen is a mute button. So if you can keep yourself muted as the panelists are speaking, that would be awesome. And yeah, that should be it.
Okay. I guess we can start with our panel now. So first of all, as Kristen said, tonight we have on our panel, we have Joshua Pribanic and Melissa Troutman, the producers of this film. First of all, I would like for you, Joshua, if you could give a short introduction of where you're from, the work you do, and what inspired you to get into that work.
I'm gonna unmute Josh.
Got two mute mics over here. Hi, everybody. I'm Joshua Pribanic. I'm one of the producers and the founders of Public Herald, where we've made this film, Invisible Hand. I'm from Sandusky, Ohio, so right on the Lake Erie shoreline, which is on the occupied land of the Huron. And I currently am in Pittsburgh, and I'm on the occupied land of the Osage, the Haudenosaunee, and the Susquehanna. which was part of the Iroquois Confederacy. But we were inspired to make this film because, we saw a lot of questions after we made Triple Divide Redacted, people trying to figure out what they're supposed to do with fracking and how do they deal with the oil and gas industry. And one of the most effective ways that we saw people do this is by banning the industry and passing bills of rights, local bills of rights, that included rights of nature. And I, for one, have always been a proponent of rights of nature long before I came into the fracking story back in 2007 or so. 6 is when I kind of was a part of this. And then I gave some talks on it in college. And that we had the chance to start this film after Melissa wrote the story about Grant. And that's kind of how this all took off.
Thank you, Josh. That was great.
For sure.
Melissa, to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Troutman, also co-director and co-director of Invisible Hand and co-founder of Public Herald, which is an investigative news nonprofit where we also happen to make documentary films. I am coming to you from Potter County, Pennsylvania, on occupied lands, once stewarded, caretook, and loved by the Haudenosaunee and Susquehannock peoples. I came to this work through water. So there's a very special and unique geologic feature in Potter County. It's a hilltop where water flows into 3 different water basins. And that in and of itself is not so unique. That's kind of a regular thing. But this one's unique because it's a place where 2 continental divides come together, which means that not only is everything from here downstream everything that happens here affects a lot of people downstream, but downstream is thousands and thousands of miles in different directions, and the waters here end up in the ocean at 3 different parts of the continent. So water, my connection to water brought me into the reporting of water contamination related to fracking. And then, like Josh said, that's what brought us into this space where, once you realize how vulnerable, how disregarded, and how at risk our water supplies are, and then on top of that, once you learn that the people who supposedly are protecting water and the laws that are supposedly protecting our precious water, and I say our as a possessive pronoun, but it's not really ours, that water as the entity that it is not actually protected by the laws and structures that are in place. And when people come up against that, there is a big question, what do we do about that? And rights of nature and the community rights movement in Pennsylvania, where rights of nature began back in 2006, was for me just a no-brainer. And it was also, it made complete sense to me, because it gets to the foundational core issue that not only affects fracking and coal mining and water contamination and environmental justice, and it also gets to the heart of a lot of human rights issues, and that is that nature is not a part of our legal system. It only as property is it a part of our legal system. And so, when we discovered Grant Township in Pennsylvania and other municipalities across the country who were taking matters into their own hands and granting legal rights to nature as an entity, as a living thing, it just set off alarm bells. So.
Great. Made perfect sense, right? Yeah, I totally get that. I also want to acknowledge that I forgot my land acknowledgement, and I totally meant to include that, but it wasn't in my notes, and I was just very focused on what I was doing. But yeah, I'm from southwestern Pennsylvania, and my land acknowledgement is to acknowledge that we reside on land that was Shawanwaki or Shawnee and Osage land. Very important to acknowledge that. So my next question for you both would be, how could rights of nature be implemented in rural southwestern Pennsylvania? I know that in the film is featured other parts of rural Pennsylvania, but we also have, a lot of fossil fuel extraction in Greene and Washington counties, as you know, and fracking and leachate issues and things like that. So that's my next question for you. Whichever one of you wants to start. Melissa, maybe you can start this time.
Sure. So rights of nature and community rights, rights of nature can be implemented anywhere where people believe in it, right? And you can do that through a democratic process as demonstrated in the film. And those of us who work on environmental justice issues in rural areas, especially in Pennsylvania, often come up against a lot of resistance. And that's unfortunate. However, in making this film, most of the communities many of the communities who are doing this are coming together from different perspectives and finding common ground in the reality that the people who live in a region or in an ecosystem should have at least equal stake, if not the most stake in the decision-making processes that happen there. Josh, I feel like you have more to say about this, actually. Kind of fumbling.
Well, there's this big misconception that, the rural communities in Pennsylvania, these red parts of the state, are not going to be open to these ideas. That they're not going to take these ideas and pass them into their community. And I think the film does a great job at just kind of blowing that idea right up, because Grant Township is, one of your most densely populated conservative areas of this state. These are people who voted for Trump, and in the most part, and they've also voted for rights of nature. So you kind of have to ask yourself why. And one of the big reasons is that they don't want big government telling them what to do. They want to make their own decisions in those places. And it's not that the conservative areas of this state are somehow unfriendly to the environment. What's the most beautiful place in terms of, untouched natural wilderness in Pennsylvania? And that's Potter County. Potter County is your most conservative area of this entire state. So I think those places could be really receptive to these ideas if green organizations took a different approach in communicating with those communities, and possibly just reminding them, that the strongest environmental laws that exist in the state of Pennsylvania right now were signed into law by a conservative president. Richard Nixon's the one who signed that, and he's responsible for the majority of all of our laws right now that really do anything to protect the environment. This new situation, when it comes to rights of nature, that is something where these communities who are concerned about their environment, who don't want big government telling them what to do, they have the opportunity to take back that local power, take back local control, in the state of Pennsylvania, for instance, by passing home rule. And that's what Grant did. Grant passed home rule, and with a home rule charter, you can include rights of nature in your Bill of Rights, grant the ecosystem personhood, and the only way that can be stopped is the state has to sue you to stop it. And Grant's a great example in the film where home rule has become so powerful for this tiny community of 750 people that the state's running away with its tail between its legs because the judge said, hey, DEP, if you guys want to sue Grant Township, you're going to have to prove that, in court, that you're capable of doing more for that community than they are for themselves. So the DEP would have to come in and argue the case that they've fulfilled their duties in a court because Grant passed home rule.
Impossible.
Yeah, and good luck there. I mean, we've provided an enormous mountain of evidence about DEP being neglectful of their duties to the point where it was enough for an attorney general to send out, 5 investigators across the state and then start the grand jury. And now we have criminal charges being brought against the industry, and hopefully someday soon, criminal charges being brought against the state regulators. But I think that, that the door is there to open to talk to these communities about passing home rule, including rights of nature, to stop something just as basic as radioactive leachate being discharged into their rivers. Do they want their kids and themselves walking around in rivers that have radioactive contaminants floating down, which is happening every day in rural Pennsylvania right now, based on the reporting that we released at Public Herald and the places that we mapped, which are mainly rural places here?
I think that, Southwest Pennsylvania has a lot of extractive industry, and, strategically to implement rights of nature, the strategy might be to introduce that concept in a way that addresses a specific ecosystem or a specific harm to an ecosystem. So rather than saying we're going to ban fracking because it's killing nature or harming nature, I think a much better way to introduce that into a region like Southwest Pennsylvania is, because so many people have a vested interest in fracking, is to attach it to fracking waste, because people don't have vested interests in fracking waste, as people don't get royalties from an injection well. So,
and that's what Grant did.
That's what Grant did, right? They
big signs.
Frame.
Radioactive waste coming to the town. We don't want it. And I think everybody can understand that. They don't, and everybody knowingly or unknowingly right now is being subjected to that radioactive waste across many, many parts of the state right now.
Yeah, and by passing a local law that says no radioactive waste because it harms people and nature, well, we're part of nature. It's not actually an and, but that's how people talk about it. When you pass a local law, like, imagine being the person who's coming in holding their radioactive trash, oh, well, I'm going to sue you so I can put this here. That person's not going to be very popular. So.
Those are great answers. Both of those are great answers. And actually that answers my next question, because it was about how can rights of nature be tied to the current issues we're facing with radioactive fracking waste. Well, how about this next question then? How do you think rights of nature could be tied to building a more diverse and sustainable economy in our area? You've already sort of spoken to these issues, but if you could speak more specifically to them, that would be really great.
Joshua, do you want to first, or?
I can. So from my perspective, I started on this stuff in Ohio. We were basically trying to create a local economy that had principles of rights of nature attached to that. And that really means, for me, understanding what resources are available in your area in order to build up the commerce in your area. How much can you extract without depleting those resources, and how do you recreate that surplus in that area? And I think that rights of nature could do a really good job just starting to create that measurement. And that measurement is tied to biodiversity. So, you want to know how much biodiversity exists there, how much you can do in the area in order to keep the biodiversity alive versus, what's going to be too much and actually kill that. And in many places right now, the economies may not have a measurement at all of what their biodiversity is because we're suffering so badly from ecocide. So, I mean, you have to weigh in a lot of different things, but I think that communities in general are receptive to the idea of keeping the wealth local and not exporting all of their wealth to corporations. Rights of nature is the kind of legal structure that sets up businesses to be mindful of that type of commerce. So businesses would start to create wealth locally, and keep that wealth circulated in that area in order to maintain not only their environment and their way of life, but just a healthy standard of living, which they, in most cases, I guess, don't have right now. One of the strong ways of doing that is kind of overriding the free market. The free market and capitalism do a fantastic job of owning your wealth, or sorry, owning your, community by getting you to trust certifications. So, you buy things based on your trust of those products and certifications. And local certifications will always trump these national corporate certifications. And that's a fantastic way of beginning to establish businesses that are attached to rights of nature. One of the best examples of that is in Martha's Vineyard. Martha's Vineyard has an island grown certification. So when you go through the grocery stores and you buy things, you can buy things based on island grown certifications. So you can buy from all those local farms and all those local businesses and not have to worry about exporting your, capital to other markets that are organic markets run by large corporations or something. Organic isn't something that's just that great all the time. So those kinds of steps locally, and with respect to economy, for me are, closer to a personality of rights of nature. And I think you might not call it that, but that's essentially like what it would be doing.
For me, it's very simply starts with, as we think about moving forward in sustainable development, agriculture, anything, we need to put nature at the center of the decision-making processes. So as anything that involves planning, development, land use, ecologists who understand the local ecosystems must be involved. It requires us to have a much more common understanding of ecology. And again, to put nature as a living entity with a right to thrive and evolve at the center of all decision-making processes. As part of the center, not the only center, part.
Those were both really, I don't know what that chatter is. Those were both really great answers. I'd love to keep asking questions on that because we could talk for hours, but I'll get to my last question so that we can then get to the questions from the audience. So my last question, related to the others, is what are the steps our members can take to support the rights of nature? I already spoke with Joshua briefly before the panel about how one of the things that I like the best about the film is that from an organizing perspective, it shows how people can actually take action. And it does obviously require a lot of persistence and patience and determination. But if you could just speak to what, our members can do to get involved in this, that would be great.
Well, I think the first step is to talk to people who've done it, right? So the way you can do that is there is a Pennsylvania Community Rights Network. There's also an Ohio Community Rights Network. And both of those organizations have either staff or volunteers or board members who have done this work. So my suggestion is that you reach out to both of them, and I will put their names. I'll put their names down in the chat here, but reach out to the people who've done it and have a conversation.
Yeah, I think that's critical, you know, to talk to those communities and learn from them if you're actually forming a group to try and pass rights of nature locally. And, you know, we have a page on the website that you can go to. We've organized a lot of really helpful information on the website, and you can go to invisiblehandfilm.com/action. And on that action page, there's a list of communities that we're helping to support. And then there's a list of organizations that you can connect with worldwide on the rights of nature issue to try and talk to them and see what to do. There's also a What Are Rights of Nature page, and that page breaks down all the history, all the legal documents, which I'm actually going to add all those legal documents to the action page right now. So if you want to know what these bills look like, we collected all of them and put them on the website so you can read through them and see.
All right, so I put a link to Pennsylvania Community Rights Network in the chat. And for those of you who might be calling in, their website is www.pacommunityrights.org. And I also put a link to our Rights of Nature action page at invisiblehandfilm.com. And for those of you who are on the phone, that website is invisiblehandfilm.com/action.
Did you get my part? I don't know if I think I got cut out there for a second.
What, Josh?
Did you get that part? I was talking about the action page, or did that get cut out? I can't remember.
I heard it.
Okay, cool.
Did others hear it?
Yeah, good.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm having a little trouble with my internet, but I heard most of what you both said. Okay, well, those are the questions that I had for you, but I know there's questions and comments in the chat. So I'm going to ask Kristen to speak to those.
Great, thank you for that awesome discussion. So I saw one comment earlier. This will be our first question. How do you approach local township about whenever public water ownership is private and spans 3 townships?
Is your goal, depends on what you're trying to do. Are you trying to convert it to public? Are you trying to get your township officials to enact rights of nature that's protective of your water supply?
Yeah, I missed that. Were you saying, Kristen, that they want to know how to deal with changing private water to public water between 3 different areas?
You want to hop in, Clodagh? You can hop in.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, can you? Cool. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello. My question is because I'm in Bell Township, Beaver Run Reservoir is 9/10 of a mile away from me. I have private water, to which, Melissa, you already understand what's happening. You've seen some of what's happening. So as I approached my township, now let me back up by saying that Beaver Run Reservoir is in Salem Township, Washington Township, and Bell Township. So it's not just me having to approach my township. It would also mean that I would have to also go to 2 other townships, correct? If we were tried to enact a rights of nature, because when I went to my township meeting, back when I already knew that the water was contaminated, but the DEP said dump bleach in your well and you're fine, which I knew was wrong. And then I got threatened to have charges pressed against me if I contacted them again. So my hands have been tied. I'm very verbal with them. I don't care anymore. And they can act as though they do, because I know now after I drain my hot water tank, that I've got even a huger mess than I ever thought I did. So my question is when I went to my township and said to them, would you please write a letter to the DEP? The solicitor time and again kept reiterating, we can't do anything. We
Right.
can't do anything. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not an answer. That's not an answer at all. And if you say it again, I'm going to stand up and leave, because now I'm talking to a wall, to which that's exactly what happened. So my question, like, how do you even begin to, this is not even my body of water. I mean, what is contaminated in my well is going down there.
Mhm.
It's going right down, you know what I mean? So it's so confusing as to what to do.
Well, if your objective is to protect Beaver Run and the aquifer that it sounds like you're also getting your private water supply from,
Yes.
I mean, that's
God, I can't find
a
myself.
good question. And I think there's multiple strategic approaches to that. I'm not sure you would have to you would have to pass rights of nature in order to protect Beaver Run from all municipalities. It might just be that it would be effective to do it from one municipality. And
Yeah.
because it is the drinking water source for tens of thousands of people,
130,000 people.
130,000 people,
And they're draining this thing, fracking, and it's so low now that I can't imagine right now how it's going to fill again. And they're not I don't see a limit that was put on this reservoir to drain it from people's public water.
Well, 130,000 people is a large stakeholder group. Who all would be interested in,
For sure.
democratically enacting and democratically enforced rules to actually protect Beaver Run, which the state has clearly not done up until now.
I actually have been visited twice now by Jeff Pratt from the Attorney General office. They have taken all documentation that I've gotten from the DEP and from Professor Stoltz whenever they had tested the well from Duquesne University. And they have that, and they make me feel as though, that they have this body of water included in this. And yet, as I sit here every day and go across that dam, wonder why the ducks aren't on that water. And I scream, where are the ducks? Because there's something wrong. There's something obviously wrong. And that's why I have a big eyeball in my yard out here too.
If you want to, make rights of nature a part of that, and then include all those different areas, I think a good approach could be is you treat it, as a biological boundary, and you create rights for the watershed specifically. So rather than, establishing rights for the reservoir itself, you're going to be establishing rights for the watershed, which includes the reservoir. And then you can also look at Pittsburgh's bill, which includes this idea of toxic trespass, meaning that anything coming into that area, pollution coming into that area from outside of that area, can be held, legally accountable. That's something to do, but all of that has to be done, from my experience in the state, if you actually want to have the legal clout and the legal power in the courtroom, you have to do that through home rule. So it would have to be part of your home rule charter.
Yeah. So check out Pittsburgh's Rights of Nature Ordinance for language. That's a really powerful one. And also reach out to the Pennsylvania Community Rights Network, and they're going to have probably more, or they're definitely going to have better ideas than I am. So yeah. 130,000 people. I would start with them, and here's the crux of the community rights of nature movement, right? It's not about going to leaders or elected officials and saying, hey, can you do this thing? It's about gathering your community to do that. right?
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Clodagh. So we have another great question, actually multiple questions from Mr. Blockus. Would you like to ask the question, Mr. Blockus? Are you there?
I am here. Sorry. Yes, thank you. All right. So a lot of my students are here, and we all watched the movie. We thought it was great. We appreciate you doing this. So I wanted to get your perspective on a couple of different but very closely related issues. I have 9th graders here to take US history and 10th graders that take modern global history. And we're talking about a lot of stuff. Ironically, we're talking about the invisible hand tomorrow. So I thought this was very well timed. So I want to get your perspective on property rights in general and why you think our society places such importance on them, such paramount value, and if things have to be that way. And then also, if you think electoral politics is the best way to attack these types of giant problems, or are there other effective methods? You know, you covered Standing Rock in your movie, and what you think about alternatives to just elections that people vote in once every so often.
Do you want to go, Melissa? Or?
Yeah, I'll start. Well, thank you for talking about this with your students. That's amazing.
Oh, we can thank Maggie Carlin. She's the one who let me know, so she's here too.
Okay, well, thank you. The first thing that pops into my head is that if you guys have room in your curriculum for this year or in the future, I would highly recommend incorporating the Democracy School workshop that the Community Rights Network does. I've taken the Democracy School 3 times. It's just a 1-day, long day workshop because there's a lot to learn about the true origins of our society. We are kind of brought up in school with pretty romantic ideas of why our revolution was fought in America. And in the reality, when you really get into the literature is, in the history, is that the foundations of our government were built on law, like the commerce law and English common law, which are property-based legal structures. And that's why property is the thing, because it is the foundation of our legal system. And nature is considered property, just like people used to be considered property. Everything stems around property in our current structure of law. That's a major part of the problem. And so, and in terms of electoral politics, well, the big challenge there, right, is that, you know, people in power, those who hold power in a society, are not going to create the changes to let go of that power. That's not how it works. And so when we go up to the people who are currently holding that power and say, hey, can you please do this? That doesn't work. So we need to infiltrate that system or turn it on its head so that we're really actually have a direct participatory democracy where all people are represented and have a stake and have a voice. If we can manage to reform our current electoral system in a manner that does that, cool. If we have a hardcore look at it and say, especially given in the timeline we have to address the climate crisis, which isn't very long. So how do you make long-term systemic change? How do you make huge systemic change in a short time frame? That might, when I think about it that way, it's impossible to imagine that kind of reform happening in the time frame we need it to without confronting the system directly and dismantling it in nonviolent ways.
Definitely. Yeah, coming off of that, on that action page, you know, we have, I think listed in there, the Earth First Direct Action Manual, which is a great manual on how to perform direct actions if you actually want to go beyond the electoral process. And yeah, the idea of human, rights only existing because you have laws for them. That's how you kind of have to treat this idea of rights of nature. Human rights are considered to be these inalienable things that exist without these laws. So rights of nature, from my perspective, is exactly the same. We don't need to have a law passed to recognize the rights of nature. It exists, and it's something that you can defend and fight, regardless if your community or if your state or federal government has recognized it. When it comes to property, we wouldn't be America unless we could own everything. So it's like it's this idea of ownership versus stewardship, and that goes back in the film to these different cultures that you're watching on the screen, which are in direct contrast with one another. The one that Milton Friedman has created in the United States since the 60s and 70s versus the ones that exist prior to our colonial structures, the indigenous cultures that were here, which didn't necessarily treat this land as something to own, more or less as something that they were stewards of. There's writings that go back, I think they've like 10,000 years, where they kind of considered nature to have souls the same way that we have souls. And that's how the language incorporated nature. And we can start to change our language to move in that direction when we speak about nature, either in public speaking or something else, and stop referring to it as a piece of property, calling it or on those kinds of terms. And I talked about this in another discussion where an indigenous podcast was saying that they had language talking about nature where they could refer to it as ki or kin, kind of like the plural of relatives. So just changing your way of speaking about nature on those terms can help to change the way it's being constrained as a piece of property, and do something entirely different.
Yeah, I take that a step further. Many of the conversations I've had with Seneca friends and other indigenous folks are that's not even so much a matter of ownership versus stewardship. It's a matter of right relationship with all of our relatives, human and non-human. So it's about maintaining a relationship more than stewardship of something that's other.
Yeah, from the philosophical perspective, there's a problem with rights of nature essentially within our legal system, because it's more or less legitimizing our legal system, and there's a big question there as to how legitimate that is.
And really, that was my question. And if by the way, I also really appreciated your snippets of Friedman in there. I thought that was really striking. But that was my question. Are we really just, in your view, with this process, are you just kind of nibbling around the edges, allowing the property rights to remain central like that? Is that working through the system, or is that like kind of self-defeating? Coming from someone who has done none of this. Very impressive work.
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem for our Western culture, for white culture in general, that we can't really get our minds around something else. So rights of nature is a way for us to relate to the ideas that are inside of an indigenous community, things that are held sacred, and the language that they have in that community, which already has embedded in it rights of nature, but nothing specifically saying those terms. You know what I mean? So we had a really hard time getting different nations in the film to talk about rights of nature, because it wasn't part of those nations, like the Blackfeet and the Ho-Chunk. When we spoke to them in 2014, prior to Standing Rock and whatnot, we were trying to incorporate their leaders in the film to talk about rights of nature, but that wasn't part of their culture. So they couldn't speak to this
Right.
kind of
Yeah,
Western
nature
legal
doesn't need
structure.
rights.
Yeah. So we have these really great outtakes, you know, with these elders from those communities, which we'll have to release at some point. But it wasn't until, you know, with after Standing Rock with the Seneca Nation that we were able to introduce rights of nature as a Western legal structure to deal with the wastewater treatment plant happening up in Triple Divide, and then have that discussion with the Seneca Nation about it. And then it became like really like weird, like, you know, they were like, we weren't honoring their beliefs and their language by having them talk about rights of nature. And that's why we shifted to showing the prophecy in
Yeah.
the film and having the prophecy run against everything else.
Thank you folks so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Hey, for your students, I wanted to say that on March 9th, we're putting together a youth international screening with other youth groups internationally. So if you guys want to be a part of that, you know, to help organize that or do whatever, just reach out to us and we'll connect you with the other high school that's taking this on and the other youth groups. And yeah.
Why don't you send me that information? I'll make sure they all get it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We have a question here. There's a comment actually in the chat. One of our barriers in southwestern Pennsylvania is political will. And curious if folks in the other towns ran and won on campaigns along these issues. So she's basically asking if the supervisors in Grant Township were there when this started, or did they change at some point?
There was definitely some switching, specifically about the Rights of Nature campaign there.
Oh,
So yes, absolutely. Where there is not political will, you have to create it. So people have to step up and run for office. Okay. That's part of the, yeah.
Okay. Well, as we suspected, there are tons of questions in the chat. We would like to go to breakout rooms though, just if we can, for just like 10 minutes. And then when we come back, we'll try to get the other questions in. Does that work for you, Kristen?
Yeah, how about we let Michael ask his question? I told him he could ask it, so
Okay.
we'll do that real quick. Michael,
Yeah,
do you want
Thank you. That's so kind. I'll make it quick, and it might be a really quick answer because I don't know if there's actually a precedent, but I was curious in your research for the film. I guess to back up, I'm an organizer with the Sunrise Movement in Pittsburgh. One of our priorities is looking at air quality because that's one of our big regional issues. And our frontline communities in particular in Clairton and Braddock both suffer from really terrible air quality and respiratory illness issues that are compounding COVID impact. So it's a big thing here, as you're probably aware with your Pittsburgh connection. And I was wondering if there was any precedent for applying these sorts of rights of nature frameworks to air quality. It's like so much more amorphous than a body of water or a piece of land. And if not, I guess I would also be curious if there are precedents about rights of nature in more urban environments that have similar sorts of air quality concerns. Thanks.
Well, Pittsburgh has a Rights of Nature ordinance on the books. It's just not being used.
Exactly.
So I would check that out and maybe pick it up and be the people who actually do something with that. Look at the language. It's been a long time since I read it, but there is, like Josh mentioned, the toxic trespass provision in the Pittsburgh Rights of Nature ordinance. Toxic trespass applies to air, right? I don't know of any other rights of nature bills that have been passed specifically due to an air issue. I would reach out again to the Pennsylvania Community Rights Network and ask them that question. I
just scraped the legal documents that we have on the action page. You know, we have a search bar up there, so you can search for keywords to see if that's in there. And with air quality, there's 5 documents that come up. So there's one in Bolivia, one in Uganda, another one in Bolivia, and so there's like probably something there if you do a keyword search, you might be able to find that. And I think, you know, with the Maldives, we're dealing with climate specifically, and that would have to do with what is contained in the air. So that would be a good thing to check out too. But yeah, I'd be happy to partner with you on dealing with a lawsuit on the air quality. I live in Wilkinsburg, so I'm dealing with that air quality, you know, practically every day, and it's to the point where it's so bad that I'm like considering moving. It's just that bad here, you know, in the mornings and at nights. It's unreal. So
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a really common thing that I hear. I'll absolutely reach out, Josh. Thank you. And thank you both. Appreciate it.
I'll go ahead and ask the last question that was posted. Jordan asked, does the legal issue of preemption come up?
Oh,
oh
yeah.
boy, big time.
Big time preemption.
Big
I'm
time
the
preemption.
parent, you're the child.
Why don't you
Do
talk?
what I tell you to.
I'm going to bring up the latest preemption language, but you go ahead and address it, and then I'll read what it is.
Oh, once again, everybody, people who hold power will do everything they can to shove it down your throat and to keep hold of that power. And that happens through preemption. It happens at the federal level down to the states, and then the state level down to the municipality. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we have the home rule mechanism to kind of wiggle out of that like parental authority and preemption a bit, but not totally. So we have to be absolutely clear that democracy is illegal in the United States, okay? Direct participatory democracy where we get a say in our own communities, not exactly legal. But just like it used to be legal to own humans, you have to make something that is currently illegal legal by doing it anyway. So when you enact, like, we are not lawyers, so this is not legal advice, but there are plenty of people working on community rights and rights of nature who are attorneys. You should talk to them. But let me just say that even though the state thinks it's your daddy, it ain't. And you need to assert your local right to make your own decisions because you're adults.
This shit's happening everywhere. So the corporations are freaking out, and they're going to the state legislators and passing this stuff. As soon as Libor, which you saw in the film, happened, the Ohio budget got passed with a subclause making it illegal to bring any lawsuit into the Ohio courts that was attached to rights of nature.
Right.
So that's how quickly they're acting on this stuff. In Florida,
Yep.
in Florida, that they
Florida.
just passed this giant, rights of nature bill in Orange County, largest county in the country to do that. They have a state preemption there. So, when I asked the lawyers about what does this mean when somebody passes this bill and there's a state preemption that exists, and the lawyers from Earth Jurisprudence told me it just means that what they passed was essentially a poll. So 89% of the people in Orange County approve of rights of nature, which is really interesting because that has to do with the whole organizing around politics and what should Democrats focus on or whatever. But I should read to you what is currently happening in Missouri. So Missouri is proposing this language on the floor right now, and it says that nature or any ecosystem shall not have standing to participate in or bring a civil action in any court of this state. No person on behalf of or representing nature or an ecosystem shall bring a civil action in any court of the state. No person on behalf of representing nature or any ecosystem shall intervene in any manner, such as filing a counterclaim, cross-claim, or third-party complaint in any civil action brought in court of the state. And this is the most important part. Any plaintiff bringing a civil action shall be human and shall not represent non-human entities. Now that could be that could really screw up a lot of corporations right there, because of course corporations are also non-human entities. So all of a sudden that may be like a huge freaking problem, because all you have to do is get one good lawyer to take this language, this preemptive language, which exists in Ohio and Florida and possibly Missouri right now, and go to court and say, this corporation is a non-human entity, according
Right.
to the state's language.
There's a lot of
And they're
legal.
going to say, oh no, we were talking about this, we're talking about that. Be like, well, we want to talk about what defines a non-human entity, and the court will have to figure that out. And if they all of a sudden decide that the corporation is a non-human entity because these guys thought they were going to preempt rights of nature bills, that's going to be a hell of a story.
They'll say it's made up of humans, therefore it's human. Here's the deal.
Well, there's an option there. Don't play around.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be fun little like tit for tat game in a courtroom. But
you guys notice Melissa and I agree like half, maybe less.
half of the time, 58% of the time, Josh and I agree.
Great
on it.
editor.
But it makes for good, solid content at the end. States can sue you as a community for asserting your democratic rights to make your own damn decisions. They can do that through preemption. But here's the thing. If there are 1 or 2 communities in the state doing that, it's really easy for them to like slap them down and sue them both. But what if there were 24 communities doing that in your state? Then what are they going to do? Run out of money, that's for sure. Run out of money.
Yeah.
Trying to fight everybody off. So anyway.
On that, thank you, Melissa. On that note, we actually have someone that wants to say something brief before we go into breakout rooms, and that would be Veronica Coptis. Take it away, Veronica.
So generous, Lisa. You're like, just happens to be this person who might maybe be my boss too, but as well. No, I think the thing I wanted to note people, if like preemption is coming up in your towns, it's actually a really good tool to mobilize, particularly in conservative places. Like people, really the everyday person has no clue all of the different ways in which the state preempts our communities, our governments. Like we have talked about this, not even around environmental issues, but like if the state wanted to change their minimum wage, or if our county wanted to change our minimum wage because we have economic struggles, they can't, because the state says no. They're like all of these ways. So apparently across the state of Pennsylvania, you're supposed to be able to make the same amount of money in middle of nowhere Greene County as inner city Philadelphia. Like that's ridiculous. And so when you, particularly with conservatives, I find in my organizing, and I've been organizing in a rural conservative place for over a decade now, that people, they hate that. They're like, what do you mean? They want to tell me I can't do something. Watch me, watch me, Joe Schmo, diehard Republican, tell the state, no, I'm going to do this instead. So I think not to let it like bombard you down, but use it creatively as a tool to organize. And the electoral work is very important. And I think since there's some young folks on the call, I think sometimes when we think politics, we think like state senator or whatever, we think big. There's so much power in local elections and running for those seats. In a lot of small towns, they're pretty easy to win often, because maybe not where we live in Southwestern PA, but in a lot of other rural places where industry is not as like invested, they're just overlooked positions. Like we're making an influence doing electoral work from a very nonpartisan way because no one does anything around elections in small towns.
Thanks, Veronica. Awesome point. So
That was our executive director, in case you all didn't know. Center for Coalfield Justice. Woo!
So I'm going to send you guys to breakout rooms for about 10 minutes so you guys all have a chance to talk. And I will also put our questions in the chat once you guys get in there. But we're going to have everyone introduce themselves, talk about your biggest takeaway from the film, talk about similarities you saw between your own area and what they talked about in the film, and what a better future could look like for us all. So I'm going to send you guys out now through the wormhole.
Kristen, were you able to send me something?
I will get it to you at the end of this.
As other people had the same problem getting into the movie.
Okay.
Yeah. Jim, did you see the movie? Finally?
Hey, Kristen, we'll keep that password active for tomorrow, just in case anybody missed it today.
Okay. I'll resend the email to people in case it went in their spam or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, I had somebody in my breakout, Lois in my breakout group also hadn't had a chance to see the film yet. So tomorrow too, please.
Sorry about that, people. We're having trouble with our email service.
Did it spam it?
I think so.
Yeah, I've been seeing it do that a lot lately to people's
Yeah.
emails. Hey, can I push Rights of Nature swag?
Go for it, Josh.
Go for it.
You have it to look at though?
I mean, I mean, I could share
I
my
mean, I need
screen.
modeling. I need
Well,
modeling.
I'm not wearing it. It's not.
Where's the
I
swag?
need this thing or something. We haven't made it yet. All right, so we got some really awesome artists. Meg Lemire from Philadelphia, who also did amazing merch for Protect PT. So if you want some really cool, nature-based shirts, Protect PT has got a sweet collection right now with Bree Bird. Bree Bird was on that too. So we're going to do a series of stickers and T-shirts, which is Defend Nature's Rights. And that'll be coming out like in a week or so. So if anybody wants to, like get some bumper stickers or stickers for their computers or like T-shirts and stuff, just keep an eye at invisiblehandfilm.com. You can subscribe or, our Facebook pages and stuff, and we'll start posting it.
Lois has a shirt. Lois has a shirt.
You can show us a shirt? Oh, that's rad. Somebody's got one. Lewis got one.
That's the Beaver Run Reservoir that Clodagh was talking about that's being, decimated by fracking. So that's what that represents. So it represents like true struggles that we're going through right now.
Where's the beaver biting through the pipeline or whatever?
Yeah, hold on. Let me turn my camera off and you can see it. There's this is Beaverzilla. He's awesome. He's pulling up the pipeline and ripping it apart.
Yes, Beaverzilla.
That's awesome.
I put the link in the chat for anybody that wants to check out the stuff.
That's great. Okay, well, is there any more questions that anyone has? We're running just a little bit behind here, and we don't want to hold people over what we had already planned to do. So I just want to sort of open up the floor to see if anyone has anything they learned that was really exceptional in their breakout room, or just has any general comments or questions. If so, speak up.
I mean, I just want to throw this out there. This is Veronica. That like, if you're really thinking about how to start, because this is a deep organizing campaign, it takes building power, it takes connecting to your community. And our organization has a wealth of knowledge of organizing, particularly in small towns that are facing giant energy companies, that like don't hesitate to reach out to our organization, to sit down, to brainstorm, to strategize, to figure out how you would make this work in your town. And if you live in Washington and Greene County, we're probably already talking to you about this anyways. But if you don't, like we don't want to just hold our knowledge of doing this organizing and strategizing in our own towns, because like Melissa said, we're only going to win if we're, I think of the whack-a-the-mole game, like we're popping up in all these different places and like they just can't keep on top of how to whack us all back down.
Thanks, Veronica. I know Veronica and I go way back. So I met Veronica when we both worked at Mountain Watershed Association. 9 years ago, 8 years ago. We're not that old. Anyway, that was my first like environmental job in Pennsylvania, and I'm so glad that I got to work with Veronica. She is y'all. She is the organizing queen in Pennsylvania. I swear to God. And I'm not just saying that because I like her as a human being. I'm saying it because it's true. So please, I'm just going to echo that if you're thinking about doing some deep organizing in your community, definitely reach out to CCJ.
I also want to give a shout out to Protect PT. I know Jillian's on this call. If you want to say hi, you could do a shout out. They are another amazing organization in Southwest PA.
Yeah, thank you guys for the invite. This was really wonderful. And yeah, I pulled out my Beaverzilla shirt. This is the Beaverzilla in full form.
Love it.
That's great.
Shutting it down. Yeah, and that was based on a pipeline, or actually it was based on a well pad that was never meant to be permitted in the state of Pennsylvania, should not have been permitted because it's actually draining a wetland. And for 4 years, the DEP ignored us. And we finally have a consent order and decree to try to stop them from polluting the waters that are actually going into the Beaver Run Reservoir. So I put a bunch of links in the chat, and if you want to check us out, it's just protectpt.org. And yeah, grab some merchandise and learn more about Beaver Run and the other stuff we got going on. Thanks, guys.
And Debbie Anderson put a comment in here that I'm seeing. They're talking about the new Enbridge development that's happening in Minnesota with pipeline 3. And
yeah, I was typing really fast, but it's going to be like Standing Rock.
No doubt.
My language wasn't that good, but you guys said we were running behind, so I thought I'd better get it in. But yeah, we're facing something really difficult, and I'm in a subgroup of MN 350, and we're looking at trying to get, you know, some kind of rights of nature for the Mississippi River and the watersheds and all that. So that's one of the reasons I'm here.
Awesome. Did you know, I think it's Melissa, isn't it the Ho Chunk that passed the rights of nature for wild rice up there?
Yeah, I was just going to say somebody did for wild rice.
Actually, I think it was the Anishinaabe, White Earth.
Anishinaabe?
Yeah.
Well, I know the Ho Chunk were in support of it. And then, so that could be a way that, you know, anybody here, if they want to get active with an issue happening right now. I mean, the Enbridge pipeline with the Line 3 is going to be a huge deal if they start constructing that, which, you know, all the equipment's there right now. The fight is probably going to happen, like, could be tomorrow for all we know.
I know it's really, we've held it at bay for so long that we really thought, you know, during this whole presidency of Trump, and we thought, you know, right before, you know, things are going to happen, they're going to build it. It's just.
What's the best way to tap into that?
Peggy.
Oh, I should bring up one of the success stories with rights of nature is in Penn State. So State College, they wanted to build a pipeline through State College, and somebody had passed the community rights of nature bill in State College back in, like, I don't know what it was, 2012. And that prevented that pipeline company from being able to go through State College. Of course, I think they just rerouted it around that area. But, you know, that's the whole idea of, you know, just trying to make sure that more people are doing this. And, you know, as Veronica said, it's just a lot harder for them to get through the maze. So yeah, if you can support what's happening in Minnesota with Line 3, like, please reach out to them and, you know, donate or, you know,
Debbie, what are the groups? What are the main groups that we can be following for the Line 3 fight?
Minnesota 350 is one group. Honor the Earth is another one.
Yeah.
Right. The Sierra
Rise Sisters.
Pardon?
The Rise Sisters.
I don't know that group exactly. I mean, the Rise Sisters, I don't. Is that the group of nuns who got arrested?
No, it's the sisters from the 7 nations, the tribal nations here.
I haven't heard of them organizing on Line 3 as much as Honor the Earth and Tarahuska and Winona LaDuke, and, you know.
If anybody could put the link in for that, that would be great. So we could check those out.
Yeah, but thank you so much for your support. I'm scared.
Yeah, I mean, that, you know, all of us could help them financially, you know, with Standing Rock and everything. You know, one of the best ways you could just send money to them or send
We're
donations.
trying to stop it too with,
Like, they of course they need equipment, so they're probably gonna have an equipment list that they'll need.
we're also with the other thing is with COVID right now, we're trying to get the public health people to say we can't have all these man camps and all these people coming, these pipe fitters, thousands of pipe fitters to northern Minnesota. So we're trying to get a stay on that. That's probably the big thing that we're trying right now, to get it to stay for a while, to stop while COVID's going on. And
Well,
then,
if we get the resources, I'm sure we'll be there to try and document and report on it the best we can too.
okay, thank you.
And if I can.
Yeah.
One thing that Josh mentioned, and I think that this is very important, is we talk about the successes of a college rerouting the pipeline. Remember, it probably went through some marginalized community, and I think we need to be aware of which communities they go through. And then the second thing that I'd like to say, well, three things, is these are really great success stories, and I really appreciate it. We tried to do this in Windsor, Colorado, but we have a community where the community actually de-annexed property. So the industry didn't have to pay taxes. So you're going to see the ones that are just as enthusiastic about what we're doing, they're just as enthusiastic on the other side. And I think we're losing ground. And I really appreciate seeing the younger folks here. Just so you know, I walked out back in the day with the Chicano marches and the indigenous marches. And even back, when we had the black marches. And I remember the whites only and the blacks only signs, and we haven't moved hardly anything. And I feel very disappointed. So your work's cut out for you, and I hope it doesn't last where you guys 60 years of sitting there doing the same thing, looking back in retrospect. So it's going to be hard because they're gaining ground, and I'm not being a bummer. I'm trying to say this for enthusiasm, to say, go for it. This is what's going to happen because we're losing ground. And then the second thing is Cambridge Analytica came here, and they actually, you look them up, and they actually considered Windsor one of their successes because they know how to play this game very well. And then the third thing is watch who you're dealing with. Look up Sierra Club. They actually took money from the industry, 350.org. I can actually share stories. Some of these big groups are corporations, and my name's JD Roybal. You can look me up. I'm not trying to undermine everybody, but what we need to do is be absolutely aware who's around us. That's why I got my picture darkened. If you look up Windsor, right now, Weld County doesn't even want to adhere to the mask. I'm actually in fear. I was a standing rock. There's a lot of stuff. So I'm saying, cuidado con mi familia, so being a person of color, I'm saying, be careful because this is really, really real out there. And I really appreciate the youth that's here. And just know there's still a lot of us behind you. And I really want to say thank you all.
But yeah, thanks for bringing that up, JD. I think it's super important for everybody to question the leaders that are taking on some of this work and what their motives are and what they're doing. I think we tried to expose that as best we could in the film. You listen to people in the film that you trust, and then in the end, you have to question what they said because of what you find out about them. I think it's really important for everybody to have some kind of criteria to question these big organizations that are doing what they do.
And if there's an email I can share stuff, one thing that I'd like to share with you, the college in Boulder, they're considered, Boulder's this supposed to be this hippie idea, but really it's one of the most racist places. And what's really interesting is they've been doing a lot of exposés on the college, and they actually even fired. Has anybody heard of Detlev? He does all the air monitoring. He was fired. I'd like to share this with the group. So if somebody be sure to, I'll send emails, and if they can distribute it. I think it really is important to see how the colleges are actually taking part in these endeavors, and to what degree that they've actually been infiltrated. And again, this is why it's important, because I am in Colorado, is we share information, and then we can actually, there's no sense in everybody experiencing what we did. And then we can actually form a cohesive chain of folks that we can actually combat this endeavor, because the corporations are doing it. I mean, they're already going ahead of us, as you mentioned, stopping, preempting rights of nature, but they're also preventing us from actually protesting. I mean, simple protests. And so I think we really, getting to know each other and having this chain of folks together, I think is so important as well. And remember, we're not condemning anybody. It's just having our eyes open. It's not to put anybody down. Everybody says, oh, you're getting, it's like, no. Let's just talk about what this is. And that's all. So please understand, I'm not putting anybody down.
Thank you, JD.
Yeah, we really appreciate that, JD, all of your comments. We do have one more question from Michael. He wants to ask about intergenerational activism.
Yeah, just building off the first thing that JD said with seeing young people on the call. I work with a lot of young activists, and something I was struck by seeing the film was that it was largely older activists in these places, in Cootersport and in Grant. And I was wondering, just with your experience working with those activists and chatting with them, like who is going to take on that work after them, right? This is an ongoing, lifelong struggle. And what I see in Pittsburgh, at least, is kind of a schism between youth activists who are maybe like more aligned with lefty causes, let's say, and more established nonprofit-based activists, even like the CCJ, which I think actually does a better job of being intergenerational as it is. But importantly, I think there is that schism. And so maybe as just like kind of a closing thought, I wonder about your experience making this film and how we bring everyone to the table, young activists, old activists, people who do have differing opinions about where to go next. We all need to be in it together. What do you guys think?
Thanks, Michael. We did reach out to a few youth groups when we were doing interviews for the film. We heard back from, I can't remember which one we heard back from, but they weren't, we ended up not getting that interview. But in general, yeah, youth are not involved really that much in this particular movement, except there is one group, and it's also listed on our action page on the film, called Earth Youth Advocacy, who is doing a lot of work on rights of nature. And then like Josh mentioned earlier, on March 9th, we're going to have an international youth screening and workshop about rights of nature. So we're super excited about that. And for those of you who did have time to watch the film, the democracy scholar Art Pearl in the film, who is the guy with white hair and glasses, who's talking about, capitalism's antithesis is democracy. Art unfortunately passed away last year, but in his memory, some of his former students and his daughter have started the Pearl High School. And we've been talking to them about creating a rights of nature curricula, so to speak, or just opportunities to keep talking about this. So it's not a thing. It's not really a thing yet, but it's starting to happen, which obviously I'm happy to see.
Yeah, I think that when Melissa, we had a lot of experiences with organizing that we were trying to bring youth groups in to whatever we were doing, and we couldn't because many of it was a problem with the colleges. The colleges teach these students specific things. And the one big thing that they teach them is that there's an environmental regulatory agency that's out there, and it's going to follow the laws and do its job. And it's just all total bullshit. So what has to happen from the older generation, I think, is they need to infiltrate these colleges and begin to work with the college groups, the youth groups that exist there, and establish that relationship to get them out of that institution and into the real world. When I was there, they were talking about, I studied comprehensive planning, and we would go look at these places and talk about how these new urbanistic settings were the future. And, it was just total garbage that was the colleges were distributing in environmental science classes to try and handle planning and zoning and ordinance in the future. And I only knew that because I grew up in, a family full of local businesses, and I understood what those settings were doing to the economy, to the environment, and everything else from that perspective. So I think it's really important to deal with that. And the other thing is that, a lot of the older folks, from my experience, lose their fire, and they're not open or receptive to the ideas of the younger generation, which are usually the better ideas. And that has to do with direct action and confronting the stuff. I can remember how Pennsylvania destroyed the direct action movement here against fracking by treating the youth as somehow out of control and irresponsible activists that shouldn't have chained themselves together with nails in there. How could they even dare to think that that was like a good thing or safe? So just ostracized these amazing activists that were working in the state rather than congratulating them and working with them to do more. So, a lot of those activists are gone now. They should be here doing work. And instead, they're blocking pipelines and shit in other states because the older generation here, failed to embrace what they were doing early on with the fracking struggles. And I thought that was a real problem. And we saw that at Standing Rock in the first 24 hours we were there. Immediately it became clear that there was a rift at Standing Rock between the elders of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and the young people like Justin you saw in the film, who were part of like Red Warrior Camp, who wanted to go chain themselves to the pipeline and overthrow the barricades and get across the line and block those places. And I think that it would be great if there was an intervention where, more of these ideas from the youth became part of the accepted ideas of these established organizations like Sierra Club 350, who, in my experience, just haven't been supportive of those people, unfortunately. There's the Yellowfinch tree sits happening right now to stop the MVP pipeline. But how often are you seeing that in the advertising of the Sierra Club or any of those groups? And, those are the leaders, supposed leaders, elders of this environmental movement. And why aren't they supporting the longest blockade of a pipeline that's ever happened on the East Coast of the United States and putting that at the headline of all their websites? So yeah, I think there's a really important bridge to be tapped there.
This is intergenerational, right? And so, yeah, there's a lot of work to be done at the intersection of in development of that relationship.
Can I just,
before we totally bash Sierra Club, Sierra Club was involved with the NGOs that sued and got other, the Yellowfinch tree sit was happening, and also NGOs with their attorneys were stopping it in the courts. So it was a multi-tiered approach.
I just want to add for intergenerational organizing, which we've been really doing this a lot more lately as we're engaging a lot more youth in our communities, but our history of our organization is definitely elders in the community. It's really about the culture that you set up, I think, is what's critical when you're organizing spaces and your movements, and that everyone has something to teach everybody and everybody has something to learn from everyone, and that we're only strong when we're coming through that together. And so we bring fresh new organizers into our spaces, and I may have been organizing for 10 years, but I have something to learn from them and they have something to learn from me. And it's really about setting that culture deeply in your organizing spaces, but also it's mad work we're going to have to do to shift that culture in our movements as well, in the state and national level too.
One thing though, if I can, and I mean this so daringly, so don't take offense. To me, the youth are you, everybody here, because you're younger. And believe me, there's a few of us, and I understand Josh is 100,000%, which is more than 100% right about what he's saying, because I've had to same conflict with the people my age and older. But when I say you're the youth, we understand what you're giving up. You know, you got the little ones right there. This is taking time from your life when you're most more interested in being family, you know, and you're giving up of yourselves times where most people are trying to make a career and doing that. So I want everybody here to understand that it's so appreciated, because some of us older folks, we understand what you're giving up, and it's so admirable. And so when I say youth, I really do mean you, because when you get older, I see it as being younger, and I mean it dearly. So there's nothing there, but I want you to know we understand what you're giving up in defense of Turtle Island. You know, this is very important work, and I just don't lose faith of that, you know, because that's a fact and it's really appreciated. Thank you. Now you guys got me emotional. I apologize for that. That's what happens when you get older.
No, thank you, JD. We have one last question, and that's from Erica.
Hi, thank you so much for this work. I appreciate you. I was going to ask about if anybody had looked into the corporate personhood movement and correlated any of that. We have Mississippi personhood here in Minnesota. But now I just want to shift gears to this question of youth and elders coming together, like in a permaculture model. Earlier, Josh, you said something about infiltrating the universities and getting some of the youth into the community. And we've had some elders that have done that very successfully in Minnesota. But then we've also had youth from the community, of the community, by the community, who have backlashed a little bit to that, because the land grant institution of the university that they came from moved into the community and took over all of the work and kind of turned it into research projects. And so they were applying for grants and paying themselves very well, and the youth were working on stipends. And so we've had a bit of a revolution in that area too. Like, how do we come together and weave the wisdom of elders and the wisdom of youth together in a movement that honors the work that the youth are doing, or the young folks are doing? We have Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light has a pretty strong youth group here too in Minneapolis, but I just love to hear people's thoughts about that. I've heard some elders speak in groups where they shut everything down, was totally silent, because they were speaking the truth so profoundly that everybody could feel it. So how do we do that? How do we do that successfully? Many different.
I can remember we interviewed activists from Germany with Ende Gelände, who were organizing mass actions of like thousands of people there. And one of the ways that they kept that they kept order between all those people was that they created an action consensus, a document that everybody agreed to for the action itself, that if anybody began to, veer out of that space, they would reference this like sacrosanct thing that they've all used to organize and come together and respect that, whatever that language was that they had. And maybe that's something that just could be moved into this idea of organizing with intergenerational activism, where the elders and the youth have some kind of agreement, some kind of consensus that they stand on, so that things don't get screwed up in the end. Because I could totally appreciate the idea of a college institution immediately monetizing their students going into the community and actually doing stuff. I mean, that's just all they do is monetize everything.
Okay, everyone. We're running a little bit over, so I just want to. I guess we'll need to conclude. I realize we could carry on this conversation all evening, but I appreciate everyone that's taken part, especially the panelists that we had, Joshua and Melissa. It's time to wrap up, I'm going to put a link in the chat. If anyone wants to take action on the Department of Health investigating the radioactive waste streams in oil and gas operations, there's a place there that you can take action. But once again, thanks everyone for joining us. And I guess unless people want to stay after and chat, we'll say farewell and good luck to everybody and all of their work, and take care and all of those good things.
Thank you so much for organizing. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Melissa. And thanks, Josh.
Yeah, really appreciate everybody. I'll leave my email in the comments if you want to get in touch so we can talk about things outside of an open Zoom area.
Yeah, Josh, I actually have a couple questions for you, but I don't want to keep you any longer. So I'll send you an email. Okay.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, seriously, Josh, and I